Turning Point USA had their America Fest, I think it's called America Fest, conference or whatnot, over the past day or 2 days. And of course, they have all their speakers that come out and give speeches as if they're politicians, even though they're not politicians. I think Tucker was at it last year, Tucker Carlson. I don't know if Ben Shapiro always is. But people made a big fuss about the competing speeches from Shapiro and Tucker. I didn't get a chance to see Tucker's yet. I heard some things about it that maybe he talked about making some type of alliance or coalition between Christians and Muslims. If he did say that, then it doesn't discredit everything he says, but he needs to wake up. That's not going to happen. It's not a good idea. If you're an Orthodox Christian and you know anything about the history of the Orthodox Church, you know that the church has enemies in the world, and the political enemy of the church is, in fact, Islam. There are no two ways about it. Islam is the political enemy of Orthodoxy. It has always been, and it always will be, from now until kingdom come. If you're a Christian, you need to understand that. You need to get that in your mind. Hold tight to it. Don't let it go. That is the truth. It doesn't mean we go out and try to do violence to people or anything like that. But as the Lord said, you must be as innocent as lambs and as wise as serpents. Islam is not anything to have an alliance with. What would that even mean? Right? Really weird to think that way. Anyway, I don't know what else Tucker said. I watch Tucker's show sometimes, depending on the type of guest he has on or the subject matter he's going to go off on. I generally like Tucker. I don't agree with everything he says, but Tucker gives really kind of, reasonable takes on things. He doesn't go nuts. But Tucker is a part of that idea that I had talked about in the part 2 of the Imperial stream I did, where, here's this group of people, a significant group of people that have these real issues that are... Tucker kind of gives voice to the moderate part of that. He's not a real, extremist type of guy. But anyway, I heard the stuff that Shapiro was saying, and I'm really aghast that somebody like that could be invited to speak anywhere at any organization that is saying that it's America first or that it's make America great again or anything like that. Because Shapiro was one of the early loud voices on the right wing that was anti-Trump, that was never Trump. He simped for that chick that accused Corey Lewandowski of beating her up at some event, some speech Trump was giving. I mean, it was a really pathetic display by Shapiro. I didn't like him at that point. I might have already quit liking him because I think that was after he had already been handled by somebody on TV. That was pathetic too. But Shapiro's up there saying over and over again the words conservative movement. Conservative movement, the future of the conservative movement this and conservative movement that and there, conservative movement everywhere. Okay, this is how you know Ben Shapiro is not a serious person and isn't down with the movement that MAGA is the sort of public face of right now. This is how Ben Shapiro, isn't hip to what the zeitgeist is. Okay? The conservative movement is something that we know started with Barry Goldwater in 1964 in his campaign against Lyndon Johnson. Barry Goldwater got trounced by Johnson. Barry Goldwater was said by Johnson to be a right-wing extremist for a number of reasons. He was called a racist, which, of course, Barry Goldwater wasn't racist. Barry Goldwater actually was instrumental in getting the National Guard of his state desegregated or integrated. But Barry Goldwater, said some stuff about how commanders on the battlefield should have the ability to use tactical nuclear weapons as they saw fit, if and when things go badly with the Soviets and we go to war. So that made him an extremist. But that's when the conservative movement started. Part and parcel with the beginning of that movement and Barry Goldwater's campaign were a hardcore conservative, not a Northeast Republican, but a hardcore conservative, what we would have known as conservative in our lifetimes. Part and parcel to that was Ronald Reagan giving the Time for Choosing speech, where the famous Hollywood actor, Ronald Reagan, gave a speech called The Time for Choosing, and it's a great speech. And it's a speech that he gave in support of Barry Goldwater, and that's what launched Reagan really onto the national political scene. It is the spot in his life when you can say, Reagan is no longer an actor, Reagan is now a politician. Reagan had already been, or maybe was at the time, the president of the Screen Actors Guild, so he was a union president. But then after that in 1964, Reagan parlayed that into running for governor of California, which he won twice, and was very popular, was a good governor, and put him in the position in 1976 to challenge Gerald Ford, who was the sitting president, for the Republican nomination for the presidency in 76 at the convention. Reagan got blocked at the convention by the Ford people, but was still invited to give what basically amounted to the keynote address of the convention outside of President Ford himself. And of course, Reagan blew the doors off the place because Reagan was a great speaker. Don't give Reagan the mic, right? There's a truism in the music business. You don't follow Hendrix, you don't follow The Who, you don't follow Tina Turner, right? You don't follow Ronald Reagan either, especially if you're Gerald Ford. So of course Ford lost the presidency in 76, and Reagan had to fight like a dog to get the nomination in 1980, even though all the Republican people wanted Reagan, right? But the Democrats and the Republicans on who should have been on Reagan's side said the same stuff about Reagan in 1980 that was said about Goldwater in 1964. Namely, he's an extremist, he's a nut, he's a warmonger, he's gonna make us go to war with the Soviets and all that. Well, Reagan stomped Carter, and the conservative movement now was like the thing. The Republican Party was the conservative movement at that point. Reagan, won almost every state in 1984, left office as one of the most popular presidents in the country's history, and he was the conservative movement. Rush Limbaugh was also sort of the intellectual force behind the conservative movement once Reagan was gone out of office, because Rush's radio show got nationally syndicated shortly thereafter. And of course, Rush is the greatest radio broadcaster maybe in history. Weekly listeners, millions and millions. Whatever you think of Rush, his politics, Rush was a great broadcaster. He had a great voice. His show was fun to listen to. It was funny. And he was highly respected in the profession. The conservative movement continued on even despite Bill Clinton winning in 1992 and George Bush Sr. going back on his pledge of no new taxes, because the conservative movement got maybe its greatest scalp of all. Forget Carter. Newt Gingrich and company took back the House of Representatives in 1994 in the midterm election, took the Senate. Republicans hadn't been the majority in the House, I think, since Eisenhower was president, which was in the 1950s. So it was a 40-year storm that hit. And ever since then, in 1994, this is 30 years ago, Republicans have been in control of the House most of that time. So that was the apex of the conservative movement, was winning that midterm and basically neutering Clinton for the remainder of his presidency in terms of getting any type of super liberal policies put through. Like, it's not happening. Republicans control Congress. George W. Bush in 2000 ran on a campaign of, I'm the new Reagan. I'm going to keep doing the stuff that Reagan did, and you can trust me to continue low taxes and being strong on defense and all this stuff. And, then 9/11 happened, and that thing that George W. Bush said he was going to be, he had to pick something else to be, because September 11, 2001 was the end of a world. The world ended on that day. The world that we lived in the 20th century, the world that existed from 1945 on, was gone. It was gone with the wind. And we're still kind of grappling with that now. What do we do? Where are we going? What's the path forward? But people continued to say that. The conservative movement in the 2002 midterm election, the 2004 presidential election, where John Kerry put out just a really pathetic presidential campaign. John McCain ran on that too. John McCain in 2008 against who was then junior Senator Barack Obama. Hard to believe. It was that long ago. But John McCain ran that way as well. I'm like Reagan, conservative movement. And Obama crushed McCain, which everybody knew he would. Bush was wildly unpopular. McCain was old. And Obama was, very charismatic. He ran a great campaign, had the great story and all that stuff. And, he just really, took McCain to the cleaners. Then we trotted out a bunch of other people in 2012, the Republicans did. Everybody trying to act like they're the most Reagan of the candidates. Mitt Romney, a Northeast Mormon liberal Republican, one-time governor of Massachusetts and multimillionaire, got the 2012 nomination and tried to tap into that conservative movement thing. He choked, he folded, and didn't try very hard at the end and lost to Obama. So that right then was the clear death of anything you might call the conservative movement with Romney. The Tea Party's in there somewhere. It's just another kind of extension of the conservative movement. But Romney doing that this guy could say he's conservative. He said, what did he say? Something like, I'm a severe conservative. He didn't even know how to talk right. Goofball. That was it. Conservative movement's done. And I remember waking up in 2012 and thinking, the day after the election, damn, the country is a lot different than I thought it was. Because things really weren't going well in 2012. Obama got reelected by default. His performance as a president to be reelected was historically bad. He got fewer votes, fewer electoral votes, fewer percentage of the vote. What he carried in the Congress wasn't very good. I mean, he was not a popular president. People will tell you he was, but he wasn't. He was popular enough to win, because look at who was against him. So in comes the man of the hour in 2015, riding down an escalator, Donald Trump. Donald Trump went from whatever single-digit percentage point was in the polls in the Republican primary to running against Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio, worthy adversaries for Trump, positioning themselves as the new Reagans or continuing on Reagan. And I really liked Marco Rubio. I thought he was something else when he was young and starting out, but he had some short circuits publicly that made you go, what the hell is it with this guy? But that's what Trump was running against, was that Reagan kind of establishment and the Bush establishment. Those are the conservative movement people. Those are the donor classes anymore. That's who became the establishment. And Trump smoked them all. He beat them like a drum. They had no chance. They had no shot. They had no hope. They couldn't do anything to him, and he had never run for anything. Conservative movement died when Trump it died before that, but if you had any doubts about it being alive, those should have been buried when Trump rode down that escalator. This idea of free markets as being the conservative movement, free markets, the whole Trump experience has had Trump saying, free market to Americans. When we say it, the rest of the world goes, oh yeah, we're going to rip them off. Now, you don't have to like Trump and agree with him to just look at trade deficits and tariffs that other countries levy on us and what we put on them for 50, 60 years. When Trump's saying that, he's shooting straight. He's telling you what's true, which is that we get ripped off. Free trade means Americans take a bath. And the whole world knows it. That's gone. It's over. We don't do that anymore. That's conservative. If that's the conservative movement, we don't do that anymore. Ben Shapiro, the audience you're speaking to, doesn't want that. Gone are the days of President Kennedy, we will pay any price and bear any burden. Because gone are the days of the Soviet Union. We don't do that anymore. What did he say about freedom? Oh yeah, with freedom. The liberty, the conservative liberty. Freedom to do what, Ben? Freedom from what? Freedom from wars? Huh? Look at a map. Look at the red counties. Those red counties, you see, the people that voted for Donald Trump 3 times, the people that voted for Mitt Romney, the people that voted for John McCain and George W. Bush and Bob Dole, those counties are the places from where the soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and coasties come from who fight the wars that Ben Shapiro and the conservative movement crowd have pushed for since the fall of the Soviet Union. That's where your men come from. They don't want it anymore. If they're going to fight, they want to fight for America. They want to fight for their country, not for Ben Shapiro. Ben Shapiro's there at America Fest. America First? Ben Shapiro's wife is a foreigner. Ben Shapiro's children are foreigners. And this guy wants to come out there and talk about morality and decency with people who he's jealous of, right? He's jealous of Nick Fuentes. He's jealous of Candace Owens. He's jealous, really, of Tucker Carlson. And the fact that Ben Shapiro is now saying the name Nick Fuentes out loud tells you 100% that Shapiro and that crowd know they're in trouble. They know that their days are numbered. I don't know what they think they'll get out of it. Maybe he has nothing else to do. All he can do is run his mouth, his high tinny voice, sounding like a robot. But they know their days are numbered. It wasn't that long ago that Ben Shapiro wouldn't say Nick Fuentes if he had a mouthful of him. Yeah, so the way that Ben Shapiro is talking, he sounds like he's 60 years old. Like, he sounds as if he was born in 1965. He sounds like somebody who really has no idea what voters think, and by voters I mean people. I mean real people, right? It's really strange to hear somebody talk like that who thinks he's conservative. That's whose money he depends on, I guess. He obviously gets money from other places too, right? He sounds like somebody who's been trained to speak a certain way, but who doesn't actually believe what he's saying. These are the code words, these are the magic words to use in order to get money. He's not a real person. He's not a patriot. He is not loyal to the United States at all. He's loyal to dollars. And you know that he is based off of how many times he talks about money, right? Free markets. What does that mean? What does that mean, a free market? Right? Ben Shapiro hated Trump. Ben Shapiro hates Trump. And you can see what the non-Trump Republicans are thinking about the future when Shapiro gets up there and tries to like throw red meat at the audience about Fuentes, Owens, and Tucker Carlson. They think that Trump is a phase, and he's not. People wanted Trump, Republicans wanted Trump to run in 2012. And he ran in 2016 and won. He ran in 2020, and we all know that everybody knows that he won. Nobody thinks Joe Biden won. I don't know how you could think that. And of course, he smoked Kamala in 2024. I don't know what would have been worse if President Biden had stayed in the race, or I don't know. I think Biden might have done a little better, and it might have been the same. I don't know. It doesn't matter. Trump was winning. There was no stopping him. I've never seen anything like it. That race in 2024. I mean, he went like a beast. It was really incredible. And when he got put on the ground bleeding and jumped up and pumped his fist and yelled, "Fight, fight, fight," there were no more fence sitters. Obviously this is a guy that is not scared, right? That's what we all really want in a leader. Policies actually don't matter that much. They matter a little bit, but all things being what they are, you vote for a person, you don't vote for a set of ideas, right? Like I talked about before, the Ben Shapiro crowd will tell you that America is propositional. It's not. America's a country. I want to vote for the candidate that has the best ideas. Okay, well, whatever candidate is out there, whatever ideas he or she is espousing, they don't own those ideas. That candidate didn't come up with them. So what are you voting for, sir? You're voting for a person. People, actually, men anyway, people that aren't retarded, for the most part, are going to vote for the person whom they think is strong. Now, academicians and people like Shapiro, the George Wills of the world, is he even alive still? I don't know. I haven't seen anything from George Will in a while. Thank God. I don't know if he's still alive. George Will is one of those Ben Shapiro types who was anti-Reagan. Reagan won. And now George Will wants to act like he is pro-Reagan, even though he wasn't pro-Reagan in 1980. He was anti-Reagan. He was a Ford guy. He was a Bush guy. But then years later, once Reagan was gone, tried to act like, oh, yeah, I was one of the Reagan's regiments. Yeah, that was me, George Will. Reagan supporter all the way. He wasn't. Same thing with Shapiro. Vote for the best ideas. Candidate with the best ideas. No, we want to vote for who's strong. The most important attribute in a leader is that he's strong. You say, what about honesty? Yeah, honesty is important. He should be moral. Yeah, he should. Absolutely. He should be pretty smart, I guess. He doesn't have to be a genius, right? But he should be smart. But more than anything, he should be strong. And Trump was on the ground bleeding and got up, pumped his fist, and said, fight. Picture is worth 1,000 words, as they say. That was one of the greatest moments in the history of any campaign ever. It's so good that people say he wasn't really shot. Right? Oh, he wasn't really shot. That was just too perfect. As if Trump didn't go through years of people trying to throw him in prison, disqualify him from running for office, impeaching him. Obviously, the last thing they were going to try to do was shoot him, which, by the way, Tucker Carlson called. He said that was going to happen. And then it did. But Ben Shapiro doesn't want you to think about things like that. He doesn't want you to think about strength as being an important quality? Should that come as a surprise from the guy who got handled? Should that come as a surprise from a guy who looks like a strong gust of wind will blow him over? Now, he can go to the gym and get some gains all he wants, but you look at him, you know he's a weakling. You know he's not tough. And I don't mean that he can fight. Lots of guys are tough who really can't fight at all. And I'm not saying I'm a guy that can fight, that I'm good at fighting or anything like that. But you know a tough guy when you see one. A guy who's not going to be pushed around. You know, verbally or physically. And everybody knows that about Trump. You know that you can't push him around verbally, and you've seen him getting fucking shot and not backing down. You know that Trump is a fighter. So, Ben Shapiro's speech is that telegraphing of what they think is going to happen in 2028. That they'll get back to the conservative movement, quasi-libertarian, milquetoast, loser candidates that have been run since Ronald Reagan. Not understanding, or maybe they do, maybe that's why they're lashing out, maybe this is their last stand. They don't know what else to do, their brains are short-circuiting. Knowing that their day has come. America first means a lot of things. It means free markets? No, that's just a way for us to be taken advantage of. And the other freedoms and liberties that Shapiro kind of hints at, what do we know those really are? What are they really? What did they lead to? We know what they led to. Just using a mild example of what it led to. Do whatever you want, so long as it doesn't hurt anybody else. You got the dude, I think it was at Penn State, swimming against girls and, crushing them. He looks like Michael Phelps against the junior high swim team out there. That's just one little example, right? The other one, is you're at Target, you're waiting for your kids to come out of the bathroom because you have girls. They come out of the bathroom and they say, "Daddy, there was a man in the woman's bathroom." The freedom, the quasi-libertarianism of the Shapiro conservative movement crowd led to that. And Shapiro said something about, if we're going to counter or fight against the ideologies or ideas or whatever the case may be of the radical left, we can't have people like Nick Fuentes and Candace Owens on our side, because we won't win. That's something that Shapiro and people older than him don't get. This is why I was saying Shapiro's, it's like he's 60 years old, okay? People that are my age, I'm in my early mid-40s, and people that are younger, people that are right-wing, so-called, people that are Trump supporters, people that would have voted for Trump, we aren't trying to out-argue the left. Argument is done. It's over. We're not arguing anymore because there is no argument to be had. We've won the arguments. We win the arguments, and it doesn't matter. We can win elections, and it doesn't matter because judges will throw out the results, or we'll get cheated, or feckless Republicans will not do what they were sent to Washington or a state capitol to do. There is no arguing anymore. There's nothing to argue about because the starting point we have for arguing is from a world that's totally alien to people who think that men can beat women. They are not living in the same world that we are. We cannot argue with them. There is no argument to be had when there is no common ground that we share. And that Shapiro and people like that want to talk about it as if there is a common ground makes me think they're either like really stupidly naive at best, or they are nefarious actors. I don't think Ben Shapiro is stupid. I think he's actually pretty smart. You have to know there's no arguing, right? And that's where people like Fuentes come in. People like, actually, Sam Hyde. That's a name they don't say. Sam Hyde. Sam Hyde's not a political commentator. Really, he's a comedian. But Sam Hyde will talk about it that way and say, no, there's no arguing. We don't have to argue. There's no argument to be had. The time for arguing is long gone.